And here are the parts that we're going to be using today from rockauto.com. We have some Centric pads and some C-Tech rotors. Centric is a pretty good brake brand, so I'm very excited for this. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's get into it. Here's our wheel. We have our tire iron. Make sure that the vehicle is on the ground so that the wheel doesn't just spin on you. But use your tire iron that the manufacturer has conveniently provided for you, and break all 5 of these lug nuts off. Okay, now once you have broken them loose, you don't want to take them all the way off because the weight of the vehicle is still on the wheel and the hub. So take your jack, put it up, and once you have the wheel off of the ground where you can free spin it, then you know it is clear for you to go ahead and take off those lug nuts. Alright, as you can see, we got the wheel free spinning. We're going to go ahead and take off these lug nuts. Sometimes you'll get lucky and they won't be on there super tough, or you can get them with a regular screwdriver to get the rotor off. In this case, I was not able to get it with a regular screwdriver, so I went and got this impact screwdriver. It's a Liesel brand. I got it from my Advanced Auto Parts. It was only like 30 bucks, not too bad. It's pretty well built. But basically, you set this in to the screw that you need to take off, and you hit it with a hammer on this side, and it applies the force and gives it a little bit of a turn to help jar it loose and get it out. So let's give it a few taps and see how it goes. Alright, so I would say after 20 or so pretty good hearted thumps, I was able to get that screw taken care of. Right, so that's going to be the only thing that's really holding our rotors in place. Next, I'm going to loosen up 2 14mm bolts here on the top part of the caliper and here on the bottom part of the caliper. I'm going to take those 2 loose, and then I'm going to take a screwdriver in here. See if I can get you a better angle. In here, just past the pad if I can, if not in between the pad and the rotor. I don't really care because I'm replacing both of them anyway, but I'm going to put my screwdriver in there and just kind of yank it over to the out to make that piston collapse a little bit so I can get this caliper up and out of the way. So give me a second with that. Alright, so as you can see now, I've got the screwdriver just placed in there, and like I said, all I'm going to do is pull that out towards me, and you can hear that starts collapsing that caliper a little bit. You just want to get it started so that it can come out. Once we've got a little bit of space on there, the whole caliper itself comes right out. Now I didn't disconnect that bottom side just so that this can hang. I don't like to leave the caliper hanging on the brake hose because some of the older ones, they could get brittle and get damaged, break and stuff. Now these pads here, I'm not gonna lie to you, I did a boo-boo, and I bought some super cheap pads. I'm not gonna lie, maybe 3 months ago. So let me try to get this out so I can show you how. This was the piece of junk that I put in. Elite. Yup. And as you can see, it ate the mess out of my rotor. Now, before these pads, I didn't have the best rotors, but I could see a very noticeable difference with this. Look at this. That is in fact a pad. This right here. That's like nothing. Look at that. It's disgusting. Look at that. Horrible. I should not have bought cheap pads. I don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I was just bored and I said, you know, it would be fun to do this job twice. I don't know. Either way, we are here now. The new pads, Centric Ceramics, fantastic. Comes with new hardware, very good. So I will lubricate that and put that back. But first, I'm going to take this caliper bracket, this part here, just off, and it looks. What? Look at Hyundai making something somewhat easy. All right, so we're gonna be taking off this caliper bracket here. This is a 14mm as well, and it's just one bolt there on the top and one bolt on the bottom. That will get our caliper out of the way, and we'll be one step closer to replacing these rotors. All right, so our fancy new brake rotor. Make sure you hit it with a little brake clean. A lot of the time they've got a film on them. This one doesn't feel like it's got that film on it, but it's always good practice to just go ahead and hit it with some brake clean, and a rag, just kind of wipe it all up, and we'll get it ready for install. All right, so now we're at the point where we are going to collapse this caliper piston. As you can see, because it wore down so much on these pads, it actually extended a little bit further than what it needs to be going. Now this tool that I've got here is a very generic kind of tool. You set the one side up inside the piston. There's some pistons that you actually have to have a key, and it'll be two little nipples in there that got to fit in there, so you can actually turn the piston as it's collapsing. This one just has to get pushed in, but I mean the process is the same here. You just kind of start turning this, and as you turn this tool, it pushes the piston in there a little bit further. So let me just get at that, because I definitely need two hands for it. All right, so here's our caliper. The piston has been collapsed. Make sure you don't push it too far. Even with this, I'm not 100% if it is enough. It feels like it's enough, but we'll see when we actually go to put it together. As far as our rotor goes, once the two bolts on the face are off and the caliper is out of the way, you should be able to just pull it off of there. Now this one was a little bit stubborn. As you can see, I sprayed WD-40 around the hub to kind of help lubricate that a little bit as I was going out. I also had a tap on the back side of it with my ball peen hammer, and that's just a hammer that I had here, but I had to tap it on the back side to get it to, you know, start wiggling free. But as you can tell, that's going to loosen that all the way off. I'm going to slide this one off and slide our new one on. I forgot to mention that when you pull this rotor off, it is the perfect time to inspect your parking brake mechanisms and see how much shoes you've got left. Now the parking brake doesn't get used too often, or the emergency brake doesn't get used too often, so it's still got pretty good pads or shoes on it as far as the thickness goes. It does look like it could use a little bit of a cleaning, so I'm probably just going to take a little bit of a sandpaper and clean that off a little bit before I install these new rotors. But everything else is pretty much self-explanatory. We're going to slap this, once I get done cleaning those off, I'm going to put this rotor on. Alright, so we've got our fancy new Centric rubber or rotor on. The only thing that I did transfer over was this little dust shield, and that's just the access point for you to get to your adjustment for the parking brake. If you rotate this down to the 6 o'clock position, take this off of there, and you go with a small screwdriver, it's got a little cog in there, a little cog wheel and you just kind of adjust it until you feel a slight drag. As you can hear, this one's actually doing pretty good. It's got the slight drag it needs, so I didn't have to do too much to it, but that's what that's for. I've got that on now. Next, I'm going to put my caliper bracket back on and my caliper back on and get it ready for pads. Now, when it comes to lubricating and replacing hardware, I know there's a lot of technicians out there that don't like to replace the hardware, mainly because the new ones sometimes can squeak. That's what they say. I personally have never had that experience as long as it's properly lubricated. And I also think that a lot of technicians are just trying to save time, because in the technician game, you know, time is money. So the faster that I can get a car out, the faster that I can beat what I'm getting paid for, then, you know, that's going to maximize the amount of money that I'm going to be making. We'll say that this job is supposed to take me 2 hours, and I could cut, you know, 3 minutes by not lubricating those pieces, just throwing a little bit of grease on the ears of the pads and keep it stepping. But it is what it is. So this is the new hardware. As you could tell, I only lubricate the points of contact, so that would be in this little channel here, this little ear, and that little spot right there. So that's literally two little spots on the other side, and then I'm going to go ahead and put this hardware in that place, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the pads on and see where we're at. Forget to lubricate your slide pins. They literally just pop out. This obviously is really old, nasty grease. I will wipe this off and put some beautiful new synthetic grease on it. But make sure you lubricate these, because if you don't, they could start sticking. They could cause your caliper to start sticking and not operate properly, which will ruin your caliper plus eat up another set of pads and rotors. So do your maintenance properly. Another little tip that could trip people up: maybe you're trying to get the caliper back in place and it's not sliding correctly. These slide pins, you can't see it too well there, but they have straight edges on one side and round edges on the other. As you can see up here, that edge right there of the caliper, it's got a flat edge. So you got to make sure that this ear, this little edge of the slide pin, is, you know, straight with that, or else you will have a really hard time trying to get this in position. I've got the top bolts already. I'm about to put this bottom one. I just wanted to touch base, share that tip. So I didn't really shoot a lot of footage when I was putting things back together, but if you are still with us through this fantastic episode, then you will know that there are only two 14mm bolts for your caliper bracket. There are two 14mm for the caliper itself. I did use the tool to collapse that caliper, and I just made sure that everything was nice and tight before I put everything back together. I've put these lug nuts on. I ain't tightened them all the way on, obviously. I did get them as far as I could by hand, and that's good enough to kind of get the wheel up flush with the hub. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly put the jack down just to get the weight on this corner here, and then I'm going to go ahead and torque it using my tire iron. But that is it. That is doing rotors and brake pads on a 2008 Hyundai Veracruz. But honestly, the process is pretty much the same for a large amount of these vehicles. Service centers will charge you close to $500, if not more, for two brand new rotors and new pads. I picked up this kit, a Centric brand kit, from rockauto.com, and I must have paid like $65. I want to say shipped it was like $78 or something like that. And it literally took me an hour, 2 hours. I was just kind of chilling doing this work, but look at how much money it ended up saving me. So I do think that this is something that a average house mechanic can take care of and do themselves. you don't have to pay shops for everything. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you on the next one.